why couples seem to have the most conflicts when it comes to money.
I don't know how many couples have sat there and tried to talk about bills, and then the next thing you know, they're blaming each other for the bills.
See, I think emotions really blur a lot of common sense.
If those 4 pillars are not in place in your relationship, you are going to have a problem at some point.
I would say that a lot of marriages that fall apart are mostly about money.
Yeah, please keep that in mind.
Hey, welcome to our podcast today where we talk about real financial problems with real people and come up with real financial solutions. My name's Irene Meyer.
And I'm Philip Villanueva. Hello, everybody. I have zero idea what we're going to talk about today, and I think Irene's going to just catch me totally off guard. Here we go.
Yes, I think in one of our videos previously, we talked about the benefits of a prenup. And it got me thinking about just in general now, again, switching back into finances as to why couples seem to have the most conflicts when it comes to money. How do you think bringing up the aspect of finances in a newish relationship should happen? And maybe you don't think talking about money in a relationship where you see it going far, by the way, not just somebody you date for the first time. I'm talking where you've just started to date. How do you bring up the prospect of money to avoid money problems in the future?
Okay, so here's what I now or before?
No, now, because you've learned from before. This is
Okay.
why it's great
So
that we're talking about this.
yeah, so now what I think, if I was a serious relationship and wanting to have this relationship, let's say, I don't know, are we married? Are we on the point where we're like thinking about getting married or thinking about living together?
Or we can see ourselves being serious. Okay, so we're not living together yet, but we're at this point where maybe we haven't even exchanged the word love yet, but we can see, we want to see this where it goes.
That's because you're still spending money freely on each other at that point. So maybe, but if I was with a serious partner and this is the partner that I'm going to stay with for the rest of my life, I would say, hey, I would want to set up an appointment with an advisor. I would want to talk to a financial advisor, financial guru, and say, hey, listen, honey, I can see us having a serious long term here. That's the idea. Are you on board with me? Are you thinking the same way I am? And if she's, yeah, absolutely, I am. I'd say it would be a good idea if we talked about talking to an advisor, talking to a financial advisor. Chances are she's not going to have a problem with that, because if I try to talk about finances with her, right, there I could trigger things to cause a fight. If she was to talk about finances with me, she could trigger things to cause a fight. The forecasting is way off. So I wouldn't necessarily want to talk about it, sit down at the table and talk about money, because somebody is going to dominate the other. It just happened. I don't know how many couples have sat there and tried to talk about bills, and then the next thing you know, they're blaming each other for the bills.
Yeah, but so you can actually have a very open conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think I would want, knowing what I know now, I seriously would say, hey, listen, if we're going to do this, let's set up an appointment with an advisor, get our ducks in line. I think that's the easiest way. That would be, realistically, guys, it would be the easiest and not the most non-confrontational way. Because again, you're not going to talk about, an advisor is going to look at your situation. They're going to project your situation. They're going to look exactly at your situation. An advisor is going to literally lay things out neutrally. And there's no, Irene, you don't need to buy that. You don't need to spend money on that. Like from a partner point of view, an advisor, if they're going to say that, is because chances are, if they're a good advisor, they might say stuff like that. Right? But let's face it, are you going to take advice easier from a doctor or your partner? Are you going to take advice easier from your accountant or your partner? From a financial advisor or your partner? Where are you going to take the advice from? Right? If your partner starts saying, no, we need to stop doing this, you might take that person. If an advisor says that, you're going to take it from a professional advice.
Yeah, that makes sense. So how do you even get around the conversation of bringing them to a finance? Because this is a very weird conversation, right? Like,
It's actually,
you can
no,
admit
it's
that
not.
having this conversation with somebody you started to date is going to
Well,
be
we're not
weird.
talking about starting. You said that. And I made sure of that at the
Well,
beginning.
there's no real commitment yet. See, I think emotions really blur a lot of common sense. That's just me, right? I think if you're at this point where you're not quite there yet with the word love, but you could be and you could see yourself doing it, that's probably the best time to have a conversation, because no love lost, no pun intended, right? But you can have a conversation. I would like to find a way to bring up a conversation like this with somebody who I see there's potential with, but also realize that I'm not bringing it up to cause a fight. I'm almost bringing it up to see how we mesh financially or even talking about financial wise. If we're in this conversation, you bring up the prospect of, hey, honey, what do you think about going to see a financial advisor together? And they're, why? What do you mean? Why? I already have my own financial advisor. I'm good. You almost start to feel like they're getting defensive, right? Unless you're really good at explaining why. So let's say you explain why. I think it's a great idea, not just to do what you did, which is great. You got your own financial advisor. But if we're going to take this to the next level, we should probably try to see where we are financially and make sure we're both okay, both together as a unit, but also individually. There are ways to bring it up, I think.
Here's the thing though, if one of your partner already has a financial advisor and I'm with that person, I'd say, okay, well, can I meet with them?
Yeah, that's a great idea. And let's say that, like, why do you need to meet with them?
Really?
I think it's a really great test to find out how your potential lifetime partner is going to react to just having a conversation around finances.
I honestly think if it gets to a point, if you're in the lovey-dovey stage and you bring up the idea of, hey, let's find an advisor that's suitable for the both of us, because I want to have all my ducks in line, right? Because I want to have a house with a white picket fence with you. I want to have a family with you, etc. So let's start talking about getting our ducks in line with an advisor now. And they attack you or they become defensive. You might want to really think, is this the person for you?
Yes.
Because if you're in that stage, like talking about religious beliefs, talking about, or I'm going to take religion out. I'm going to spiritual beliefs, right? Talking about mental beliefs, talking about, again, our 4 pillars, talking about physical beliefs, talking about financial beliefs, all of them have to mesh. If they're not meshed, just if you don't have your 4 pillars in place for you, if those 4 pillars are not in place in your relationship, you are going to have a problem at some point.
Yeah.
Realistically,
but it's just having a conversation.
You want to make sure all 4 of those pillars are structured with stability for your future growth. If not, something is going to fall apart. And it can't be submissive. No, you have to believe if you want to have a healthy and stable relationship down the road.
I think it's a great conversation to have before things get pretty serious, where you start locking in your money together or joining your financial forces together. Because without knowing the intent, I would say that a lot of marriages that fall apart are mostly about money. I think there's a lot of conversation that's not happening, that if it was just happening at the beginning, where you're comfortable about talking about money. And again, it comes down to how you were brought up. How you were brought up to talk about money. If your parents talked about money, if you saw them fight about money, then you're probably more likely to stay away from the conversation. But if you talk to somebody who does feel like it doesn't have to be a conflict, it could be a conversation, a very practical and common sense conversation, then you start to look at it from a different lens, not through the lens of what you saw as a kid. Yeah. And I think a very good time is, like you said, is bringing up the prospect of having a financial advisor. Now, when you said that, though, I do want to say my vision was, oh no, they're going to go to their bank and think that's their financial advisor. And the banker's not going to know what they're talking about, because okay. So you imagine this, Phil, we can probably appreciate this, but imagine this. We have a couple coming to us as financial advisors. We are just in the midst of getting serious, and we wanted to talk to you about our finances because such and such said this is a great time to talk about it. You're going to be, because of where you are and because of what we've talked about, you're going to be like, okay, great, perfect. But a banker's going to be like, I don't know. They're going to be like, I don't know what you want, because they're ready to sell something. They are order takers. So please do not mistake a financial advisors for the guy at the bank that you see maybe every 2-3 years to renew your mortgage or something. They're not going to help you that way. They have no idea what you're even they only take orders. They only sell products. And if you have enough money, they might refer you to a financial planner or a certified financial advisor in the branch who's only going to try to sell you investments.
Yeah, please keep that in mind. Institutions don't offer financial advice, saving portfolios and things of this nature, but it's not targeting towards any kind of plan for you. You might see commercials out there all the time, and they talk about setting you up for the future and all that kind of stuff. You'll see commercials for that, but they don't actually do holistic planning for you. You want to talk to an advisor that's going to actually look at anything from the amount of money you need at retirement to your budget to your spending habits. They're going to dig deep into you as a person, right? So you want to talk to an actual advisor that way, because that's the only way they're actually going to be able to help you, because they have to know your habits, they have to know your traits, all of these things. If they're not digging that way, they're not an advisor. They're a financial service representative, right?
Yeah, they have great, don't get me wrong, people, like, I have people at the bank that probably is really good at developing portfolios, but they're a lot of the time just limited to the company they work for. And that's what I was talking about. They have mandates in place where they have to spend so much time with each client. They have only clients they can serve that have over $250,000, right? So they're very limited as to what they can do. I want to be very clear that the kind of advisor that Phil's trying to get you or encourage you to see without sounding too discouraging is they're few and far between. I feel like there's still people like me and Phil who could take your financial situation and look at it holistically without being limited to how much you have, the products we offer. We could actually look at you for you and not put any kind of stigma or limitations on what kind of advice we can give you. But I think advisors like us, and I think you would agree with me, Phil, that we're few and far between. So be careful with who you consider an advisor. I think Phil was giving you hints as to what you can determine is the real advisor that you can really rely on, is someone who looks at not just the stuff they can help you with, but also dig deep into your habits. I think that's super important.
And super important is true. Like you need to do that because there's one thing about, I see this very often, and someone will go to the bank and they want to talk to an advisor, and they'll set up an appointment 2 weeks later to talk to an advisor, or maybe 3, depending on the availability. So they set up that appointment. So they meet with that advisor for about a half an hour, and the advisor will sit there. Oh yeah, we can definitely start you with a tax-free savings account or an RRS. They might give you some kind of information about it, maybe. What they'll start getting you doing is filling out paperwork. How much do you think contribute to the RSP or this TFSA? And it's, I don't know, maybe $100 a month. Okay, that's great. They'll get you starting out filling out paperwork. You may not even know what that paperwork really is. It will be a risk assessment, and it'll be some personal information and things of that nature. But that's what all that is. In the end, all they really care about is that you sign. Okay. And once you start signing, then money's going to start going out. Here's the thing. They didn't do any budgeting. They didn't find out your personal spending habits. They didn't find out your personal traits. None of this. So 6 months later, you're doing $100 a month and you're like, oh my goodness, I need some money. If you set up an RSP, you're going to start taking some money out of that RSP and you're going to get taxed on that.
Yeah.
And then let's say you set up a TFSA, you're not taxed, you just start taking money out of it. Okay. You can use these as banks, but that's not the idea of them. The idea of them is something for you to start establishing that you can continue to contribute to for a certain length of time that's going to benefit you when you're no longer wanting to work anymore.
Right.
So that's
Right.
it. You don't want to work your whole life. I don't know. Everyone out there in the internet community, put up your hands if you want to work your entire life. Okay. Very few of you might have done that, because there are some people who do want to work their entire life, and they might be thinking that. But realistically, when you're 60 years old, I'll ask that same question to you directly, and you're going to say no, because your body is going to want to rest and your mind is going to want to rest at some point.
Yeah.
So you need to have something for those points at that moment in time. It's not magically going to appear. Okay. If you don't start setting that up now while you're physically able to contribute to it, people, it's not going to be there. That's the idea of these things. Can you set up a dual fund where there's one that's an emergency short-term fund and one that's a long-term? Absolutely do that. But a proper advisor will talk to you and find out what you're looking for to be able to do that.
Right.
How much can you contribute? I got a great job. Okay, I just lost my job. Right now, what do I do? Oh, you have this fund. Take all the money out of the fund. Oh, okay, great.
Right.
Okay, so that fund now useless. You have to make sure that you're talking to the right person.
Yeah.
You need to make sure you're talking to the right person. That person may not say the things that you want to hear. I want that to be very clear. They may not be saying the things that you want to hear, but understand they're looking at your personality, they're looking at your habits, they're looking at your income, they're looking at your expenses, and they are looking at it neutrally with no emotional attachment. And they're giving you the best advice based off of all of the factors governing you. It may not be what you want to hear, but they will likely give you options. And one of the options may be what you want to hear, right? A good advisor will say, this is not what I recommend. I recommend this one over here. And that might be the one that you're like, I don't know if I want to do that. I like this first option over here. Okay, they'll do it because they have to do what they're saying. They'll do it. And they'll give you that option. Now, that might be an option that you want to hear, but they're going to tweak it so then it's still going to be in your favor, but it's not, it may not be your best option. People, take your best option. Always take your best option. Even if it's not what you want, always take your best option because it's in your best benefit. If your advisor knew what he was doing or she was doing, if your advisor knew what they were doing, take the best option. The recommend, it's in your favor.
Yeah, 100%. And I think at the end of the day, it's if your advisor is giving you more than one option, you're good. If you have an advisor that's just giving you one option, then move on to the next advisor, because at the end of the day, they're wanting to sell you their agenda with just one option. Yeah. I think this is like a great time to end this because we're going into another conversation now.
We
The
don't do
first
that.
original question was, what do you think about seeing an advisor? When do you bring up the prospect of financial
Yeah.
information with your spouse or your potential spouse?
That should be a very open. Again, the 4 pillars, guys. It's the 4 pillars. When you want to start talking about religion, if you want to start talking about the gym or your physical self, if you want to talk about your mental health mentally with your partner, if you want to talk about any one of those 4 pillars, you're ready to talk about all 4 of them. If you don't go to your partner and say, "Hey, let's start going to the gym together," that's when you're ready to start talking about all 4 of your pillars.
What do you have to lose?
Because if you want to start getting healthy together, healthy is not just one of those pillars. Again, it's all 4. So start talking about all 4. If I want, hey, honey, let's start going to the gym together. But you're battling with something in your mind, and it might even be about your relationship, right? You want to nip that in the bud right away because you don't want to have something minor grow into something major. Because you put it off. You don't want to get unhealthy and let it just grow. That's why you asked to go to the gym together. Because if you start thinking about that, you're thinking about your benefits together to grow together. Start thinking about all 4 pillars and get something in place for all 4.
This was a very loaded conversation, and I'm sure it'll lead to other conversations. I think it's a good point to end it off. Thanks for joining us, guys. I hope you found value in this podcast today. We'll see you guys later on our next podcast.